I am going to be talking today about all the native Hawaiian plants. And this was not my idea for a talk. I should mention that Chris Davis, the president of LICH, sent out an email a couple of weeks ago, and he was looking for somebody to talk specifically about this topic and also about recent taxonomic name changes to the Hawaiian plants. And I'm a graduate of UH Botany Department. We took a class, a semester-long class on this very topic. So a 4-month-long class. And Chris asked somebody to do it in a 55-minute session. And I remember reading that email and thinking, what a huge, monumental, difficult task that's going to be. Wonder what sucker he's going to get to do that. So anyway, thanks for coming and sticking with me. Actually, it is nice. It is a treat to talk about native plants because I got my start in Hawaii working with native plants, Colorado National Park, and with mostly working with native species. And I even ran the rare plant propagation facility at Hawaii for a couple of years. But now I work with weeds, and I think it could be because maybe I was killing too many of the native plants. They thought, well, we better have you work with something that we don't mind if you kill. So most of my days now are spent in front of a computer reading about plants rather than going out and seeing them. But I still like to go out and get my hands dirty and see the natives and all the incredible plants we have on our island. And because this is a talk about plant taxonomy, I wanted to give a very, very brief overview about the history of taxonomy on the island and why some of the plant names that we have change over the years. And so, to start from the beginning, the first people love to name and classify things, and the first people that arrived here, Polynesian Hawaiians, they were great taxonomists. They gave names to all the plants that they saw in the forest. They identified uses for them. So they were very observant, botanists. The only problem was that they didn't have a written language. So all this knowledge was passed on through chance and through the oral tradition. And probably a lot of the native plants that we have Hawaiian names for today is just a fraction of the knowledge that Hawaiians probably had before modern times. And probably a lot of that was lost because of the lack of a written language and the cultural changes that happened with Western contact. So to jump ahead a little bit, in probably the first attempt, or the first comprehensive flora of the Hawaiian Islands was published by this German physician who just happened to be a botanist as a side hobby, William Hillebrand, published in 1888, Flora of the Hawaiian Islands. And so that was the first attempt that somebody made in print to compile all of these plant names into one location. And since 1888, there have been a couple of books that have come along, a few here and there. There's another botanist, Otto Degner, who published this Flora Hawaiiensis in the 1940s. Very beautiful illustrations, very detailed illustrations of Hawaiian plants, but not widely published and kind of hard to get copies of. So that was kind of the state of plant taxonomy. You had to have access to one of these hard copies to learn about Hawaiian plants. Well, then let's jump ahead to 100 years from now. Like, how does a plant get a name these days? Well, if it's a new plant, say a botanist like Steve Perlman from NTVG goes out and finds a plant in a while and he thinks it looks like something new he's never seen before, he might take a specimen, a collection of that, send it to a plant taxonomist, somebody who describes plants like Warren Wagner. He'll look at the plant and say, hey, this looks like something different, the leaves are a little bit different, they're a little longer here. Yeah, I agree, this is a new species. So he'll write up all this detail and publish it in a very obscure taxonomy journal like Taxon or Novon. How many people subscribe to these? They're very technical botanical journals that, unless you're affiliated with a university or a research, some kind of research facility, you would never have access to these. So if you were near the University of Hawaii, you would go in, you would open up the latest issue of Taxon, flip through the pages and say, oh, there's a new Hawaiian species. But it was really more only accessible to people that were like really specialized in the field. But eventually that information might filter out and make it into more like popular, user-friendly books like hiking guides and things. Well, then in 1990, all of this taxonomic information was compiled into one 2-volume reference set that a lot of botanists call the Plant Bible, the Manual of Flowering Plants of Hawaii. And so that was the sort of almost 100 years after Hillebrand published this first flora. This flora was published and it compiled all this information into a hard copy written source that everybody could refer to and look at and agree or disagree with. But this sort of became a standard reference, and this is what was available when I first arrived in Hawaii. So I was lucky to have a copy of this and be able to learn from it. But you know, because it's a hard copy book and it takes money and resources to print these things, the changes in the plants and discoveries and name changes aren't necessarily reflected in this book. So it was difficult for all of the botanical literature to be published in a timely manner and then put it in a book like this. Until now, as we know, in the last 20 years or so, there's been an explosion of information all made available through the internet. So now the same process happens, but where these journals might have been kind of obscure and languishing on some university shelf, now every journal is pretty much available online. So you can download copies of these articles. You still might require some kind of university affiliation or password to get that information, but it's much more accessible. But the other thing is that this information now appears on websites almost as soon as they're published, and then that information can become available to everybody. So the rate of describing new species maybe hasn't changed, but the rate that the information has become available to people is almost instant. Not quite instant yet, so maybe in the future we'll, and this is kind of a joke, but maybe not really. Somebody will find a plant sample, will analyze it with their little tricorder, and it'll look at its DNA, and it'll reference it to a DNA library, and then it'll spit it out and say, this is a new species, or this is something we've never seen before, and then everybody will be updated on their Twitter feed. So you won't even have to go to the library anymore. But we're not quite there yet. We do have the cool shirts, and we do have the cell phones, but we still have to work on the genetics. In the meantime, there are a lot of great websites available to get this information, really up-to-date information. And if you're more on the egghead nerdy botany side like me, probably one of the best websites for the latest, greatest names for all Hawaiian plants is the Smithsonian Museum website of the Hawaiian flora. And it's I took a copy of their query page, because you can basically search for plants by family, genus, species, or common name, and also what islands they might be found on. And based on those criteria, it'll spit out a list of plants. And because it's the Smithsonian, Warren Wagner, the guy who published the Manual of Flowering Plants, he's one of the people that moderates this site. So this is probably one of the most up-to-date taxonomy websites available. But again, this is more for the real egghead nerdy botany person. But if you do want to know current scientific names, they're on that site. Some other really nice web resources. The University of Hawaii has a native plants website. It was set up by a former botany professor, Jerry Carr, and it's got a list of all the Hawaiian plant genera. You can click on them and see pictures of all the native Hawaiian plants. And I was just looking at this pretty recently, and it's pretty much up to date with the current plant names. But it is a little bit more on the technical side as well. Another really great website, if you heard Priscilla Moan's talk this morning, there's a website, nativeplants.hawaii.edu. And this has got a lot of cultural information on how to grow the plants, as well as lots of pictures. And I was talking to David Eichhoff, another guy who helps moderate this site, and he said that they do try to keep up to date on the latest names of plant taxonomy. So Lots of really good free resources out there. The other thing I used for this talk, this is published by the Fish Museum, Hawaiian Native and Naturalized Vascular Plant Checklist. You can download it off the web for free. It's basically a list of every native and non-native plant that is established in Hawaii, meaning that it's growing, reproducing on its own. So it doesn't list all the ornamental plants, but it does have, this was published in December of 2012, so it's fairly current. And because it's an electronic file, it can be updated a lot more easily than having to print something out. Smithsonian website also publishes updates to that manual of flowering plants now. Rather than having to print out a whole new 2-volume book, they can just put the updates on the website as well. So you can download that from their site. So I have a lot of plants to talk about today. I'm not going to be talking about ferns because Chris said I only had 55 minutes and not 16 hours. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to be going through lots of pictures of native plants in the different families. One thing I wanted to mention about Hawaii is for a tropical ecosystem, people always think the tropics as being very diverse. And you know, Hawaii does have a lot of diversity, but compared to like a Central American or South American rainforest or tropical environment, it's pretty species poor. You might be able to go to a couple acre patch of rainforest in Costa Rica and find almost the same number of species of plants or more than you might find in all of the Hawaiian Islands. That may or may not be true, but the diversity in the mainland tropics is much, much higher. But what we lack in diversity, we more than make up for in endemism or uniqueness. Our plants are like nowhere else in the world. You know, they're about a 90% endemism or unique rate. It's because the plants that did manage to make it here, crossing all those thousands of miles of ocean, once they got here, they had lots of time to evolve and adapt into the different climates and environments and elevations, and they changed so that they became like no other plants in the world. We'll see if I have enough time to go through all 1,024 of them. No, I'm actually not going to be doing that. I didn't have enough coffee. I'm just going to go through some of the major plant families, point out some of the unique genera. I'm going to be using a lot of Latin in this talk, and the way I pronounce some of these names is not necessarily the correct way to pronounce them. It's just the way I learned them or the way I, through time, started to pronounce them. So I apologize to any of ancient Romans here if I'm butchering the Latin. But without further ado, let's look at some plant pictures now. Where should we talk about? Great, and so to start with A's, the Amaranthaceae, the Amaranth family. It's a common, there's a lot of weedy amaranths in Hawaii. We have 4 native genera represented, Acaranthes, Amaranth, Nototrichium or Kuluki, and Charpentiera. And if you're familiar with amaranth because you're a farmer or a rancher, a lot of these can become kind of weedy plants in your fields. But a lot of our Hawaiian plants have become more perennial woody species. Some of them have nice silvery gray foliage, so they make nice accents in dry forest landscapes. This genus Charpentiera or Papala is kind of unique in that it's become a small tree, and one of the special uses of this plant is like a precursor to fireworks. It's got very light wood. And Hawaiians would take wood of the papala and light it on fire and drop it off the edge of the pali, say on the pali coast. And the updraft from the wind would cause it to spark and ignite and create all kinds of like a fireworks display that people below on canoes could see. So it's kind of a culturally important, unique plant. And I guess people in Hawaii have had a love of fireworks, ever since the first Hawaiians got here. They figured out how to make their own. There's another genus, Chenopodium oahuense, that used to be in its own family, Chenopodiaceae, same family as spinach or quinoa. Now it's being kind of considered to be closely related, if not included in the family Amaranth. Got kind of similar silvery green foliage, very rapid growing, does well in dry areas, but now it's possibly lumped into the Amaranthaceae. Next family, the Apospinaceae, or the dog-maned family. This is the family that has plumeria and the bee still tree, or oleanders. A lot of these plants are known for their milky, toxic sap. I think that's where the name dog-maned comes from. It can kill a dog if they eat it. And you know, you don't want kids picking up and chewing on the plumeria branch or anything, because they can get poisoned. All of our Hawaiian plants have that same milky sap, but as far as I know, none of them have any serious toxic properties to them. And some, like Elixia or Miley, are very important cultural plants. They make our fragrant Miley lei. So it's represented in Hawaii by 4 genera, Elixia or Miley, Acrosia, Rauwolfia. Both of these have, you can see their relationship to plumeria. They have kind of that plumeria style flower, and they're very fragrant. Make great landscape plants, and they do really well in dry areas. And then the 4th genus, Terralixia. The next family, Araliaceae. That's the ginseng family, the same family as the octopus tree. You might recognize like that kind of shape in some of our native plants. Right now we only have 2 native genera. Used to be 4. The one in the upper left is Chirodendron, also known as the olapa tree. The leaves kind of shake and twist in the wind, even with very light breezes. And so there's a hula named after the olapa because of the way the leaves move. The other 4, or the other 3, Monroidendron, Tetraplasandra, and Reynoldzia, all the genera are pretty big trees and dry and mesic, in some cases wet forests. Taxonomists got a hold of this one. They looked at the genetics of it, and they decided that these 3 genera were actually more closely related to this pan-tropical genus Poliscius. So this one, I know a lot of Hawaii botany people are, this kind of sticks in their craw, because these used to be almost endemic, unique genera to Hawaii, found nowhere else. And now they're saying, oh, your trees are just like everywhere else. No, they're not saying that. They're just saying that the ones in Hawaii are probably closely related genetic relatives of the genus Poliscius. So if you have that manual of flowering plants, you'll still see these names in print. But now, the new scientific name is Asteraceae, or the sunflower family, one of the largest flowering plant families on the planet. Very, very speciose, very diverse family. In Hawaii, that's true as well. We have 13 native genera. Some, like our Artemisia, is related to wormwood. Artemisia is the genus of plants used to make absinthe. So we have a couple of native species in Artemisia. We have a native, almost like a thistle, Hesperomania. You can see that typical sunflower type flower shape in all of our native genera. This family is probably most renowned in Hawaii, though, for the silver-sword alliance. Again, if anybody saw Priscilla's talk this morning, talked about how this incredibly diverse group of plants, rosette plants, the silver foliage that occur at the highest elevations, these Dr. Seuss-looking plants, Wilksia on Kauai, and this other genus, Dubaudia, that's made up of vine, small shrubs, medium-statured trees, almost every shape and environment you can think of, all were derived from one founding colonist to the island. So this is probably one of the greatest examples of adaptive radiation, or one species evolving into many and filling every niche and environment you can think of. This is probably like the classic example in Hawaii for plants. And for those of you who are keeping score, we have had a few name changes in the Asteraceae. One of our native genera, Lithokita, has 15 species that have been moved over into new genus Malanthera. Nephalium is Pseudonephalium, and Lagonifera is Kisiera. So hopefully nobody will lose sleep over that. The manual flowering plants, you'll see these old names, but there are new names published. Begonia. We have one native begonia, Hillebrandia sandwichensis or Umakanui. It's a very beautiful plant with these large fuzzy leaves, very, very showy and fluorescent, and it the big-eyed flower. It's found in kind of wetter habitats. Unless you get into nicer native areas, you're probably not going to see this one. I just wanted to mention it because it is our only native begonia, and it is named after, the genus is endemic, named after the guy who published the first flora, Hillebrandia. So we got our own genus named after him. The Campanulaceae, or the bellflower family, is another like iconic family in Hawaii because they think maybe a few ancestors arrived in the islands and then evolved into all of these shapes and forms. And now we have 6 genera, and 5 of them are endemic, meaning that the whole genus is unique to Hawaii. Every species in that genus is found nowhere else. So things like the Alula, Regamia, Claremontia, Lobelia, Trometobelia, Cyanea, or Haha, and Delicia. Another example of plants that have radiated, fill every niche and environment in the Hawaiian Islands. The genus Cyanea, I'm pretty sure has the most species of any genus in the Hawaiian Islands. So it really evolved to fill just about every environment imaginable. Unfortunately, a lot of those species have now gone extinct. But another cool thing about this family is a lot of these plants were believed to have co-evolved with the native birds here. And so you'll see that typical kind of curved tubular flower, many of them that contain a lot of nectar, and evolved to be pollinated by our native birds like this Eevee visiting this Lobelia plant. And in turn the plant gets pollinated, the bird gets nectar. So really, really spectacular plants, many of them quite rare. And again, a lot of times you have to go into really nice native forest to see these. The Regamia are becoming pretty popular in cultivation, and as potted plant too. The Caryophyllaceae, or the carnation or pink family, is represented by 2 genera, Shidea and Silene. This family is known more because it arrived in Hawaii as with perfect flowers, meaning that it had both male and female parts. But over time, a lot of these flowers developed into dioecisim, or having male and female flowers. So once they got here, they started to split their sexes, and that maybe aided in cross-pollination. So it's more of a kind of a evolution. It's got more of an evolutionary story behind it. These flowers are not very big and showy unless you look at them in the macro. They're quite pretty. There's one genus, Alcinodendron, that was recognized as a separate group, separate genus, because the flowers were bigger, showier, and contained more nectar. And they believed that that was an adaptation for bird pollination. And most of these flowers are insect pollinated, but because Hawaii had a lot of native birds, these plants started to change and develop flowers to be visited by birds. But taxonomists got a hold of that one too. And they looked at the genetics and they said, nope, Alcinodendron, you're actually part of Shidea. So all 5 of these species are now included in this genus. Doesn't mean they don't exist anymore. They're named, they're just not in their own genus anymore. The Convolvulaceae, or the morning glory family. A lot of people know this one because everybody goes to the beach. You can see our native Pohuihui or Ipomea beach morning glory. We have 4 genera in this family. A lot of them are kind of vining, sprawling plants, showy flowers like the Jacomantia or Pauohiaka, Monamia, and then there's a 4th genus, Cressa. Looks a little different from the other ones, and you probably aren't going to see that one anywhere unless you go to the island of Kaho'olawe. But this is a very showy plant. Most people will encounter on the beach somewhere. Another family, the Cuscutaceae, closely related to the morning glory family, Kauna or Cuscuta sandwichiana. The unique thing about this plant, and there's only one other plant like this in Hawaii that does this, in a completely different family. That's not just like a bunch of silly string that somebody sprayed on the beach. That's actually the plant growing that yellow color is because it lacks chlorophyll. So it basically is parasitizing the plants that it's growing on. And in this case, I think it is actually parasitizing one of the morning glories. It has these specialized groups called Haustoria that penetrate into the other plant and it sucks the nutrients out of it. So it's one of two parasitic plants that look like this. They're in completely different families, but they kind of have evolved to fill that same role. And this convo is used in lay sometimes, so you might see it like that. Droseraceae, the sundew family. We do have one native carnivorous plant, Drosera anglica or Mikinalo. This is a classic example of how a plant probably stuck to the feathers or feet of a bird and got transported to the Hawaiian Islands that way. It's got things like sticky globular seeds, and it's found up in the bogs of the Alakai swamp. It's also native to North America and can be found up in Alaska as well. So this is an indigenous species. It's not unique to Hawaii, but it is native. And despite the size and on the slide, it looks like it could take out a small bird or animal or like a dog. It's actually only a couple, maybe an inch high. So you really have to be knowing what you're looking for to see this one. It feeds on insects. If you're walking along the boardwalk up in the Alakai swamp, you can sometimes see this growing right off the trail. It's our one and only carnivorous plant. The Eboniaceae, or the ebony or persimmon family, we have two species in the genus Diospyros. They have this persimmon-like fruit that is edible. This is a culturally important plant. Lama, the name Lama in Hawaiian means enlightened. And a piece of the Lama wood was placed on the hula altar to represent the goddess Laka. So this is a culturally important, not a big family in Hawaii, but the trees are very beautiful and incredibly slow growing. But if you can get one in the landscape, they're really nice. The Ericaceae, or the heath family, this is one that is really popular and one of my favorites, not because it's a big family, but because the genus Vaccinium, with 3 species, are all found on the island of Maui. I got my start at Haleakala National Park, and you can see there it's got these nice kind of reddish purple berries related to cranberries and blueberries, and they are edible. They're quite tasty. People like to eat them, birds like to eat them, and they actually make pretty good wine too. So higher elevation level, kind of related to that mainland temperate climate where they come from. The Euphorbiaceae family is familiar to a lot of people because of plants like poinsettias and ornamental plants. A lot of the members of this family have very milky, toxic sap again. Hawaii, we have 7 native, or we have 4 or 5 native genera, I should say. One of them, once you start learning, if you're learning Hawaiian botany, everybody remembers this genus Antidesma because everybody loves their anti. And this is a tree found in mesic to wet forest, and it's a good tree to look for native Hawaiian tree snails. There's another genus, Euphorbia, which the family gets its name from. Fluvia is a dry, mesic to dry forest tree, very rare in the wild. Abutilon. And then this 5th genus, Chemisicae, or Akoko. Once again, we lost that one. It's no longer manual flowering plants, we call it Chemisicae. But all of these species have been moved into Euphorbia now. And then the last genus, Phyllanthus disticus, Hamakanimahu, is now, it used to be part of the Euphorbiaceae, now in the Phyllanthus. A lot of weedy Phyllanthus. This is our only native species. The Fabaceae, the fabulous Fabaceae, the legumes. Not a very species-rich family, but probably one of the more important families in Hawaii because of so many iconic species, like our monarch of the forest, koa, acacia koa. We have some very showy vines like Biki, Strongylodon, or Nuku-Iibi, these very brilliant crimson flowers. The willy tree is also in this family, and we do have one endemic genus that, if you have a copy of the Manual of Flowering Plants, isn't in there because it wasn't discovered until 1994 by botanist Ken Wood off of the island of Kaho'olawe. named Kanaloa after the god and Kahalaensis. This plant was only known from a few individuals off of the sea stack growing on Kaho'olawe, the most degraded, bombed, goat-browsed, fire-prone island in the Hawaiian Islands. This plant was hanging on these offshore cliffs. Turns out that this pollen that people kept finding in these pollen samples all throughout the islands, this unidentified pollen, this really formerly common plant that nobody could identify, the pollen of this species. So this dryland shrubby legume, which is totally unique to Hawaii, was once really widespread and common. Now restricted to this one little part of Kaho'olawe, but they have gotten it in cultivation too, so there are places where they're trying to grow it. One rare dryland tree, Uki, was in genus Susselpinia, is now Mesonuron, which was actually the original name for it when the manual flowering plants came out. So what's new is old again. The Gentianaceae, I won't go too much into this family other than the fact that it's a very pretty little delicate annual. It comes up after winter rains. It's an endangered species because its habitat is like low elevation coastal areas, a lot of places that have been developed or changed or modified. It used to be in the genus Centaurium, which is kind of a nice, sounds like centaur, something magical in this whole. Now it's given this genus named Shinkia. So the flower is much more attractive than the name. But again, nothing you have to worry about unless you're looking for this in manual flowering plants. The name has changed. The geranium family in Hawaii is another, it's not a very species-rich family, but it's very, very beautiful. Very beautiful members of the genus Geranium. Many of them are found in higher elevations on Maui and the Big Island, and they have this silvery foliage represented in the Hawaiian name Hina Hina, because they're adapted to that higher elevation, sunny exposure, and the hairs, that color is caused by the hairs growing on the leaves, helps to protect them from the UV and reflect the light away. So very beautiful plant. Also, as far as we know, the only bird-pollinated geranium known in the world. So one of our native species, Geranium arboreum, the flowers are usually this radially symmetrical insect-pollinated flower. This species started to change, started to develop a red color, which is attractive to birds. It has a more tubular shape. So it was formerly visited by some of our native honey creepers, pollinated, and they got nectar from it. Don't see too many native birds visiting it these days, though. It's kind of rare in the wild. And the Gesneriaceae, the African violet family, this is one of the two largest genera in the islands. The genus Sertandra, or Happy is represented by at least 61 taxa, and I don't say species because this is a really confusing genus. The plants are very variable. They occur in similar habitats, so sometimes cross-pollinate, hybrids. They like to sleep around, so there's a lot of traits. That's a big thing. But there were 61 species represented in the manual of flowering plants. I took this quote out because this is in the manual. As this book was going to press, St. John, here, if you know UH, the building, the botany building, St. John, is named after him. He published 252 new species in this genus. And the people, I don't know if they looked at this and said, oh my God. I said, well, with 3 exceptions, all the names represent hybrids and breeds that describe species. But St. John was what would be considered the ultimate splitter. So you have the people on one side called the lumpers that like to say everything is all related, and sometimes the genetics will show that genus Poliscius, all these Hawaiian plants are actually just in one genus. St. John liked to look at every minute detail of a plant and describe it. And so he was what would be called a splitter. He would make as many species as possible. And there's really some value a lot of value to what he did, because he noticed a lot of the differences and variations that might not have got recorded. If everybody said, oh, this is all just one species. So, some people kind of, dismiss what he did, but it was really valuable to capture this diversity. Next family, the Udiniaceae, is maybe well known because one of our plants, the Naupaka is easily encountered. It's indigenous, it's easily encountered at most beaches around the islands. It's also becoming popular in landscaping. But we also have 9 other species that occur in the middle and the uplands. And everybody knows the story about the 2 Hawaiian lovers that were separated by their by the father. So one was lived near the ocean, and the other one lived near the mountains. And because they were separated, they both had broken hearts. And these half flowers, which are actually whole flowers, but they look like a flower torn in half, are supposed to represent these two separated lovers. So we have the Naupaka Ka'akai, the Naupaka found by the beach, and then we have the Naupaka Kuahivi, the Naupaka found in the uplands. The Lamiaceae, or the mint family, a lot of people know this family in Hawaii because it's supposed to be an example of one of those families in Hawaii that lost its adaptations to deter browsing or grazing or anti-predator defenses. So you might hear the term mintless mints being mentioned for Hawaiian mints. A lot of these species in these 5 genera have no kind of fragrance if you crush the leaves. They do have very beautiful flowers. Many of them are tubular shaped again. They think that there's some coevolution and adaptation for bird pollination. There is one native species, Lepichinia, that is found only in Haleakala. And if you crush the leaves of that one, they are very fragrant and pungent. And this one is actually called as questionably native or indigenous. It's also found in California, and they think it may have arrived with some of the first European explorers to come to the islands. But it's so rare and scattered that it doesn't behave like a non-native species. So that's why some people think it's native. But if it's native, it was a very recent arrival. It's still quite fragrant and pungent. The Malvaceae, or the hibiscus family, is another popular, well-known family in Hawaii because of the beautiful showy flowers. Very diverse family represented by 7 genera. Abutilon, Gossypium, or the cotton family. Hibiscadelphus with these curved flowers could be an adaptation for bird pollination. Sida, or better known as Elema, popular late-native plant. Of course, the genus Hibiscus, represented by like our showy Keokea, as well as our state flower, Hibiscus brachyregia, and the yellow flower, Mahohauhele. And then I'm also going to put a plug in for the tree, the tree crop that Steve Montgomery talked about earlier today, Kokea, with these beautiful big red bird-pollinated hibiscus flowers full of a lot of nectar. They are really easy to grow from seed. They do really well in dry climates. They don't seem to have a lot of pests. So I have them coming up. I have a tree in my yard, and they pop up underneath all the time. And I just keep transplanting and potting them. And the nectar is actually really quite sweet. So if you ever have a chance to come across one of these, check first to make sure there's not a bee down in there drinking the nectar. But stick your tongue in there. It's very very tasty. I think somebody should make like some kind of energy drink out of it. Next family, Myrtaceae, is the myrtle family. Eucalyptus are in this family, but it's another iconic family in Hawaii because of the genus Metrosideros, or Ohia legua. This is another one of the most important forest plants in Hawaii. Acacia and Metrosideros are probably the 2 most important forest trees in the islands because they make up the majority of the canopy of a lot of our intact native forests. Culturally important plant, biologically important because of the nectar they provide for our native forest birds. We also have 2 other genera in this family, Eugenia and Syzygium. And this is the genus that has mountain apple, rose apple, and one native species. And Eugenia, I think Suriname cherry wasn't that genus, it might have changed, but This family is under a little bit of threat. You may know about the myrtle rust that reached the Hawaiian Islands on, they think it was on cut foliage, eucalyptus foliage that came from California. It spread throughout the entire island and really wiped out, almost decimated the rose apples growing in the island. Some people might think that's a good thing. Some people, a whole bunch of other weeds came up where the rose apple used to grow. But it's also attacking our endangered Eugenia coalauensis, which is unique to Oahu, and it's just hammering it. And there's worries that rust, fungus, there's different strains of them. Fortunately, it hasn't done too much harm to our native microcitrus trees, but they're worried that if a new strain got in and it did the same thing to microcitrus that it did to the rose apple, that'd be like a game over for Hawaiian conservation. If we lost a Mia, might as well move. So that's why people are working to try to really control the introduction of Myrtaceae island and making sure that they're clean and free of this rust. The Rosaceae family is another small one, only 4 genera, but some very popular, I should say, 4 genera, one possibly extinct. We have a native strawberry found in higher elevations of Maui, the Big Island, and the strawberries are small and not very showy looking, but I can tell you they do taste like strawberries, so they're quite good. I have them growing outside of my house when I used to live in Hawaii National Park. So that's the genus Fragaria. The rubus genus is well known for blackberries and raspberries, and we have 2 native rubus, Hawaiiensis orcala and Rubus macraei, and they do have big, juicy and quite tasty edible fruit. Ule, or osteomeles, is a very beautiful kind of creeping, low-growing plant. It can be shaped and pruned. It's got these very pretty flowers, so it's becoming more and more popular in landscaping. And then the 5th genus, Acina, is this little log plant that was, I think, last collected in West Maui sometime in the 1990s, and so they think it's extinct. So Acina, I ain't seen it. I hope it's not gone, but it's a very small, low-growing plant, and could be lost. My favorite family in the plant community is the coffee family. It keeps me going every day. But we do have a lot of native members of the Rubiaceae. 8 genera, many of them like woody trees, shrubs, bushes, a couple of low-growing plants. It's also got the genus Gardenia in it, so very beautiful, showy, fragrant flowers. There is one genus, Hediotis, and this is another example of like how taxonomy can kind of really wreak havoc with publishing name changes. This is the species Hediotis affinis, and now they looked at the molecular genetics of it and decided that it's actually more closely related to this genus Cadua. And this publication says it's been a source of taxonomic problems for many years. So there's a lot of local variation in these plants. They've been described as a number of species over time, and I just wanted to show you that all those names are different synonyms or other botanical names for that one plant. So over time, different people look at that same plant and say, it's this, no, it's this, no, it's this. So I'll give you a chance to write these down, and there will be a quiz at the end. So yeah, I mean, that's why taxonomy can be a little bit frustrating and might make you pull your hair out. Even the experts can't agree. Here's some other changes in the Rubiaceae. We have a native, we had a native Morinda trimera, or related to the Polynesian plant Noni kuiki, now in the genus Gynaphodes. So, not that that'll affect anybody's life. We're really asleep tonight, but you know. The genus Canthium, if you have the manual of flowering plants, it's been for a while referred to as Sidrax. This is a really nice plant in the landscape. It looks kind of like mock orange with very nice clusters of white fragrant flowers. Alaheke is its Hawaiian name. And it's also becoming popular in landscaping because it can be shaped and pruned, and it does have that nice fragrance to it. And then this other little low-growing wet forest plant, Nurtura granadensis, was changed into the genus Coprosma for a little while, and then they decided, oh no, it's actually Nurtura. So blinked and missed that one. The Rutaceae family is the family that gives us our citrus trees. We have 3 native genera in that. Melico, Zanthoxylum, and Platydesma. If you have the Manual of Flowering Plants, it was published in 1990. It refers to this genus as Pelia, named after the Hawaiian goddess of the volcano. But since that time, the genus has been changed to Melico. This is a pretty diverse group of plants. Maybe best known for the lane-making plant on the island of Kauai, Mokihana. It's got these very fragrant fruit capsules that smell almost like root beer when you puncture them. So it's, many of the plants in this family have very fragrant leaves. You crush them, a lot of oils in them. So probably be used more in the landscape, although some of them are very rare, endangered, and occur in pretty wet forests. The sandalwood family, not a very big family, only two genera, Exocarpus and Xanthellum, or Hawaiian named Iliahi. This family is probably more known because of its history in Hawaii and how exploitation of the sandalwood harvest in the early 1800s decimated some of our native forests and kind of upended traditional agriculture. People were forced to harvest sandalwood to bring income into the early kingdom of Hawaii. There's still quite a few native species of sandalwood. You have to just know where to look for them. One of the cool things about this family is a little sandalwood fun fact. They're what is known as hemiparasites. So these plants do photosynthesize, they do get energy from the sun, but the roots will also penetrate into other plants growing nearby, so they can actually draw nutrition from plants that they're growing next to. People that cultivate sandalwoods will often grow them with another plant in the pot to help with their growth. Saphidaceae, this family is known to a lot of people because of some of the popular fruit trees like rambutan and lychee. We have three genera, the Electrion, Piscipindus, and Dodonea. Dodonea, or Abutilon, is a really important dryland, subalpine, forest shrub to small tree, very versatile, very hardy, does really well in the landscape. Some of the seed capsules they produce can be quite colorful, so that they're used in lane making. Electrion is a very rare tree. You can see it's almost extinct in the wild. It's a really highly endangered species. But you can see its relation to some of those other edible members of the family. And apparently the Hawaiians were able to eat the seeds of this plant, and it does have a white pulpy aril, kind of like a lychee that grows around it. Unfortunately, rats really find them quite tasty as well. So if you don't collect the seeds off the tree right away, the rats will get them. The Sapotaceae, small family. I only mention this because both genera have changed. Isoluma polyhesicum, now Sideroxylon. Hawaiian name is Kiahi. And Buteria is Planchinella, or the Ala'a. These are really nice plants because they have kind of a coppery, kind of silky undersurface to their leaves. I think they both do really well. I don't know why they should be used more in landscaping because they're both dry to medium dry climate trees. I think they can do really well in just about any landscaping. The tomato family, it's a small family represented by 3 genera. The Ohellokai, or Lycium, coastal succulent plant. Genus Solanum, represented by some creeping plant like Solanum nelsoni and a couple of other small growing shrubby plants. And then another plant mentioned is Steve Montgomery's talk, the genus Nothocestrums. It's the native host plant for our first listed endangered insect. Mantua blackburnii, which now I think unfortunately is much more easy to spot on the non-native weedy tree tobacco, or Nicotiana glauca. People that work on Maui, they're always joking that we need to get these guys on the nicotine patch and get them off the nicotine tree and back onto the native. But it's good that they're able to persist and survive on an alternate host plant. And then the last of the dicot families, the Urticaceae, is another example of Hawaiian plants that maybe lost their defenses to browsing and grazing. So you might hear people refer to the nettleless nettles, or the stingless nettles of Hawaii. 7 genera, not entirely stingless. We do have one genus, Taxa, I think is how it's pronounced, on the Big Island. It does have stinging hairs. There was some debate as to whether or not it was actually native to the islands. There's a species on the mainland that it's closely related to, and they thought maybe George Vancouver, the British explorer who brought cattle to the Hawaiian Islands, could have accidentally brought that plant to the islands when he released cattle on the Big Island. But people think it is native. It's only found on the Big Island, and it does have stinging hairs. Never seen it, never touched it. The rest of the genera are all without stinging hairs. Some of them are very well known, like Picturus or Mamaki, and Pichardia. It's the Hawaiian name Olona. It's a culturally important plant because it's got some of the strongest natural fibers in the plant world, and it's used to make some of the most durable ropes. One of the stories goes that Captain Cook replaced all the rigging on his sails with Olona ropes because they were superior quality. And here's some other dicot family members that I didn't quite have time to cover. Our native poppy, Okawa. And very quickly I'm going to go through some of the iconic monocot families. Archipelago palm family. We only have one native genus in the low palm, Pichardia. Very showy, beautiful native palms found on all the islands, and they're becoming much more popular in the landscaping because of their attractive foliage. And unfortunately, some of them are very rare. Again, rats love to eat the fruits of these, the seeds of these trees. So some of them become quite rare in the wild. The Cyperaceae, or the sedge family, it's pretty diverse family wide, 14 genera, kind of in more boggy, wetter habitats. A lot of native species. Nothing that too many people worry about unless you're really into plant taxonomy. But a bunch of the genera have been lumped into the genus Cyperus, which the family gets its name after, and Gania is now more relieved. So again, you don't have to worry about that unless you are studying for your botany and biology. Iris, the Iridaceae family, we have one native species in Iris, Cicericium aquae, Maulaili. I think that translates loosely as the grass that turns the skin red. This is a small, nice, dainty, delicate plant found in higher elevations of Maui and the Big Island. And these will dye your skin red if you crush the leaves and put them on your skin. One of the uses, the cultural uses, was that it was supposed to turn tattoos kind of a bluish color. I know from personal experience that if you wrap the leaves around your skin, tape them there, leave them in place for a little while, and then expose it to the sun, it will burn your skin and leave a big red weltering, like oozing blister. So it's not something, whatever's in that chemical, you don't want to leave on your skin for too long because it's very phytosensitive or phytotoxic or something, photosensitive. The orchid family is special in Hawaii because of how few species we have. This is one of the largest flowering plant families in the world, very diverse, showing flowers, but we only have 3 native species and 3 genera, and they have very tiny wind dispersed, many orchids have very tiny wind dispersed seeds. So they think that why don't we have more orchids? You go to any other tropical place in the world, tons of orchids, different shapes, sizes, showing flowers. Well, they think that we probably did have more orchid colonists that have arrived over the millennia, but because orchids can be very particular about their soil or their mycorrhizae, or they have very specialized pollinators, that if they got there without those, they weren't able to persist and survive. So as a result, we're left with only 3 species that are Liparus, Nectocylus, and Placifera, 3 genera. And these 2 are fairly common in intact native forests. This 3rd one I've never seen in the wild. It's very rare. And there's a place on Molokai where it's still fairly common in one small exclusion, but otherwise almost extinct in the wild. The Pandanaceae family is well known because of the hala tree, which is actually questionably native. They think it might have been a Polynesian introduction, a very early introduction. If it's not Polynesian introduction, it would be considered indigenous. And then the EAEA, or the Freycinedia, is a kind of a viney plant that grows in native forest, and and then the grasses. And another big speciose family. Here's some other monocots. And last but not least, why do we care about this? I mean, what's in a name? Call a rose by another name and spell is sweet. So most of us aren't going to be affected whether or not a name is one or the other, as Hediotis or Kadua. But this is another quote from the Manual of Flower and Plants. Probably there's no other area in the world for which the classification of flower classes has been more confused in recent times than in Hawaii. Unfortunately, the taxonomic confusion has completely hampered conservation efforts. So the name may not matter to the plants, because it doesn't care what you call it. It may not matter to most of us, but it does have conservation implications. If something is classified as one thing and it's listed as an endangered species, that could mean the difference between you being able to grow it or not grow it without a permit, whether or not somebody's going to build something there or not, whether or not there might be funding to protect it. So most of us don't need to worry about what the latest name change is, but there are people out there keeping track of this. There's a bunch of websites, so when you are curious about them, you can go there and find out the new changes for yourself. So I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening, and go back to lunch.